The story begins in near silence, inside a cavernous factory where motion has been replaced by waiting. Robotic arms stand frozen beneath cold industrial lights, their chrome surfaces reflecting deep blues and muted golds from dormant control panels. Warning icons glow softly on layered digital screens, not flashing, not alarming, just present. The machinery is ready. The workers are ready. The designs are flawless. Yet nothing moves. Somewhere upstream, far beyond this factory floor, a single material has failed to arrive. Not lithium, not chips, silver. For decades, silver was treated as an afterthought, a background element in the modern economy. Too common to inspire fear, too valuable to ignore, yet never considered strategic in the way oil or rare earths were. That assumption shaped an entire industrial worldview. Electric vehicles, solar grids, smart weapons, satellites, data centers, all quietly absorbed silver into their cores, gram by gram, circuit by circuit. No alarms sounded as dependency deepened, no speeches warned of concentration risk. The metal simply flowed, invisible and reliable, until it didn't. In late-night offices across California, procurement teams stare at supply chain maps rendered in gold lines against darkened screens. Where there were once steady routes from Asia to North America, there are now bottlenecks marked in amber. China. The flow narrows there. Export approvals slow. Paperwork lingers. Classifications change. Officially, nothing dramatic has happened. There is no public embargo, no headline declaration of economic warfare. Yet containers that once crossed oceans without friction now sit in ports, waiting for permissions that may never come. Silver is no longer just silver. It is a policy instrument. China understands this better than anyone. Over the past 3 decades, it did not merely mine silver, it absorbed the entire value chain. Ore extraction, refining, alloying, component manufacturing, each layer pulled inward, subsidized, protected, integrated. Western economies, chasing efficiency and environmental distance, let these stages drift overseas. Refining was dirty, margins were thin. Better to innovate at the top of the chain and let someone else handle the metal. That decision now echoes through every stalled production line. Inside Beijing, the atmosphere is controlled, almost ceremonial. Conference rooms glow with warm yellow light reflected off polished tables. Charts are not dramatic, they are precise. Export volumes, strategic allocations, downstream demand projections. Silver appears not as a commodity, but as a lever. By adjusting licensing frameworks and regulatory scrutiny, flows can be shaped without ever being cut. The brilliance lies in subtlety. Markets struggle to price what cannot be clearly seen. Across the Pacific, Tesla's factories feel the consequences immediately. Electric vehicles are silver-intensive by design. Power electronics, battery management systems, inverters, charging interfaces all rely on silver's unmatched conductivity and durability. There are alternatives, but they compromise efficiency, safety, or longevity. In engineering rooms lit by cool blue screens, teams debate microscopic design changes, shaving fractions of grams from each unit. The math is unforgiving. When millions of vehicles are planned, even tiny shortages become existential. Financial dashboards begin to flicker. Procurement costs rise quietly at first, buried in broader inflation narratives. Then delivery schedules slip. Investors ask questions on earnings calls. Executives respond carefully, avoiding the word China, speaking instead of global supply adjustments. But behind the language, urgency builds. Every idle hour inside a gigafactory burns capital. Every delay ripples outward. Suppliers, logistics firms, dealerships, charging infrastructure. Silver's absence multiplies through the system. The camera drifts through offshore financial centers where the real drama unfolds, far from factory floors. In Singapore, traders monitor futures curves that bend sharply upward, their screens casting amber reflections onto glass walls. In Zurich, vaults hum beneath thick stone, holding allocated silver owned by funds whose beneficiaries remain hidden behind layers of trusts and shell companies. Scarcity is monetized here long before it reaches consumers. Those positioned early profit quietly, protected by jurisdictions designed for discretion. This is how modern power operates, not through visible confrontation, but through control of choke points buried deep inside complex systems. China does not need to announce dominance, it simply allows the world to feel it. Each delayed shipment forces manufacturers into a choice: pay more, wait longer, or redesign the future around constraints set elsewhere. None of these options favor speed or independence. In Washington, speeches echo through marble halls about resilience and reshoring. Plans are announced, incentives proposed, maps of potential mining projects glow on presentation screens in patriotic hues. But the timeline betrays the ambition. Mines take years to permit, refineries take longer to build, skilled labor must be trained, environmental reviews must be survived. Markets, meanwhile, move daily. China's advantage compounds, while responses remain theoretical. The deeper truth is uncomfortable. The United States did not lose control of silver overnight. It surrendered it gradually, transaction by transaction, efficiency by efficiency. The system rewarded short-term cost savings and punished redundancy. Strategic stockpiles were deemed unnecessary in a world of free trade. Just-in-time logistics were celebrated as brilliance rather than risk. Now, the bill arrives with interest. As night settles over an American factory, emergency lighting casts long shadows across silent machines. The atmosphere feels less like a workplace and more like a vault, sealed, waiting, constrained. Somewhere inside a battery pack design, a missing silver connection prevents an entire vehicle from existing. Scale magnifies fragility. The future stalls, not because ideas are lacking, but because atoms are absent. China's position grows stronger precisely because it remains understated. Official statements emphasize environmental protection, domestic demand, national security. Each justification is defensible on paper. Together, they form a wall no single trade complaint can breach. Allies feel the pressure too, but quietly. Japan negotiates, Europe hedges, everyone adapts. America, visible and vocal, finds adaptation harder. The story does not. The second movement begins far from factory floors and drafting tables. It opens inside a silent boardroom where the lighting is low. The walls are textured stone, and a single line of gold light runs down the center of a long black table. Laptops glow softly, displaying layered financial models rather than engineering diagrams. No machines are discussed here, no tolerances or materials. The language is capital efficiency, leverage, exposure, exit strategy. This is where the future of engineering is quietly decided without engineers in the room. Over the past 2 decades, financial logic has eclipsed mechanical logic as the dominant force shaping industrial outcomes. Engineering still creates value, but finance determines who captures it. Every major German industrial firm now operates as 2 entities in one body, a visible producer of precision and an invisible financial organism designed to extract, shield, and multiply returns. The tension between these 2 realities is where the crisis deepens. The transformation accelerates the moment private capital enters the picture. Private equity firms do not arrive with malicious intent, they arrive with spreadsheets and discipline. Their mandate is clear: increase returns, shorten timelines, optimize structures. To do this, they reframe engineering firms not as long-term institutions, but as portfolios of assets. Plants, patents, brands, and labor are unbundled, priced, and reassembled into financial instruments that can be traded, leveraged, or sold. Inside these models, engineers appear as line items. Their experience, once priceless, is now quantified by hourly cost and utilization rate. Senior engineers with decades of tacit knowledge suddenly find themselves justifying their value to financial controllers whose screens flash red when margins dip. Decisions once guided by intuition and mastery are now governed by dashboards calibrated for investors who will never step inside a factory. The camera follows a single product as it moves from concept to market. At the beginning, an engineer sketches an idea under warm light, calculations precise, the room filled with quiet focus. But as the design advances, financial oversight thickens. Software tracks projected return before the prototype is even built. Risk committees review scenarios where production is delayed, outsourced, or replaced entirely. The product becomes less a creation and more a financial narrative that must justify itself at every stage. Debt becomes the silent enforcer. Leveraged buyouts saddle engineering firms with obligations that demand immediate cash flow. Research budgets shrink. Experimental projects are labeled inefficient. Long-term innovation, once Germany's strength, becomes a liability in a system that rewards speed and predictability. Engineers feel the pressure long before it appears in annual reports. They are asked to do more with less, to innovate within narrowing boundaries, to accept that excellence alone is no longer enough. As the narration deepens, the visuals reveal shadow banking structures operating just beyond the reach of public scrutiny. Leasing companies finance equipment off the balance sheet. Special purpose vehicles absorb risk and obscure accountability. Supply chains are financed through complex arrangements that turn physical movement into financial yield. Each layer distances decision makers from the human reality of engineering work. In this environment, automation is not introduced to empower engineers, but to replace uncertainty with controllable assets. Machines can be financed, depreciated, and leveraged. Human expertise cannot. Algorithms do not demand pensions. Robots do not negotiate. From a financial perspective, replacing skilled labor with capital equipment is not a technological choice, but a balance sheet optimization. Germany's famed Mittelstand feels this shift acutely. These mid-sized firms, often family-owned and deeply rooted in local communities, built their reputations on craftsmanship and trust. For years, they resisted external capital, believing independence protected their values. But globalization eroded their insulation. Larger competitors gained access to cheaper capital. Customers demanded lower prices and faster delivery. Eventually, many opened the door to investors. The moment that door opens, control begins to slip. Governance structures change, reporting requirements multiply. Decisions slow, not because engineers hesitate, but because approvals now pass through financial filters. The company's center of gravity shifts subtly but decisively, from workshop to spreadsheet. The camera moves through a regional industrial town at dusk. Factory lights flicker on, casting long shadows across quiet streets. Generations once worked here, passing skills from parent to child. Now, young engineers see limited futures. Advancement depends less on technical brilliance and more on fluency in financial language. Those who cannot adapt stagnate. Those who can often leave engineering altogether. Meanwhile, executive compensation tells a different story. Financial executives, adept at restructuring and cost management, are rewarded handsomely. Their success is measured not in products built, but in valuation increases and successful exits. When companies are sold, merged, or taken public, wealth concentrates at the top. Engineers rarely share in these windfalls. Their contributions are already priced in, their upside capped. The narrative returns to the boardroom. A deal closes. Hands shake. Outside, rain streaks down glass facades, blurring city lights into abstract patterns of gold and blue. Somewhere, a factory will adjust schedules, reduce staff, or delay projects to meet new financial targets. No announcement will mention engineering obsolescence. The language will be efficiency, restructuring, market conditions. By the end of this second movement, the illusion begins to crack. The crisis is not about engineers failing to keep up with technology. It is about a system that no longer aligns technical mastery with power or reward. Engineering still matters, but it is no longer sovereign. It is subordinated to financial strategies that prioritize extraction over creation. As the screen fades, the audience is left with a growing unease. If the people who understand how things work no longer decide how they are valued, what happens when the system itself begins to fail? The third movement descends deeper, away from boardrooms and into the hidden architecture that quietly governs outcomes. The tone darkens. Gold hues fade into cold blues, and the screen fills with the soft glow of servers stacked behind reinforced glass. This is where decisions made in abstract models become irreversible reality. Not through ideology or intent, but through systems so complex they feel natural, inevitable, unquestioned. Global accounting standards reward companies that appear light, flexible, and mobile. Heavy assets weigh down valuations. Labor-heavy operations introduce uncertainty. In this logic, the ideal corporation owns ideas, not factories, and controls flows, not people. German engineering firms adapt because markets demand it. Those that resist are punished by capital markets that view stability as stagnation and patience as inefficiency. The shift is subtle but relentless. Manufacturing is reclassified as execution. Innovation is reclassified as intellectual property. Ownership of that property is optimized for tax, legal protection, and investor appeal. What once lived inside engineering teams is extracted, documented, and placed into structures designed to survive without them. A knowledge remains encoded, transferable, tradable. The camera follows the trail of a patent as it moves across borders. From a research center bathed in warm yellow light, it passes into a digital vault, encrypted and time-stamped. From there, it appears on a ledger in a jurisdiction known for silence and discretion. This single transfer alters everything. Revenues generated globally will now flow through this entity, taxed lightly, protected aggressively, and detached from the engineers who created the value. This detachment reshapes incentives at every level. Management is rewarded for structuring deals, not nurturing talent. Analysts praise firms that reduce headcount while maintaining margins. Engineers sense the shift in daily decisions. Projects that would deepen expertise are postponed, while those that can be monetized quickly are fast-tracked. Depth gives way to speed. Mastery gives way to modularity. Algorithms play a central role in enforcing this new order. Workforce analytics rank engineers by output metrics that cannot capture tacit knowledge or long-term impact. Automated systems recommend outsourcing, automation, or elimination based on efficiency curves. These recommendations are rarely questioned because they align with financial objectives already agreed upon at higher levels. The narration traces a quiet irony. German engineering once defined reliability, safety, and endurance. These qualities require time, redundancy, and human judgment. Financial systems, however, reward streamlining and reduction. The more resilient a system becomes, the more expensive it appears on paper. Resilience is a cost, fragility is efficient. The camera drifts through a control room where alerts blink steadily. Risk is everywhere, quantified and hedged, yet never eliminated. Complex derivatives insure against supply disruptions, labor unrest, and currency fluctuations. These instruments create the illusion of control, allowing firms to tolerate instability in the real world because volatility can be absorbed financially. Engineers who once mitigated risk through design now watch as risk is outsourced to markets. Germany's regulatory environment struggles to keep pace.
Laws written for physical industries are applied to financialized entities that exist mostly on paper. Oversight focuses on compliance, not consequence. As long as rules are followed, outcomes are considered legitimate, even if they hollow out the very capabilities those rules were meant to protect. Young engineers enter this world with optimism, but quickly encounter ceilings. Their ideas are filtered through committees trained to ask financial questions first. How scalable is it? How fast can it pay back? Can it be licensed instead of built? Many learn to adapt, translating technical vision into financial language. Others disengage, their passion dulled by constant compromise. The visuals return to an empty factory floor at night. Machines stand still, illuminated by emergency lighting that casts long, distorted shadows. The stillness is unsettling, not because production has stopped, but because the space feels disconnected from power. Decisions affecting this floor are made elsewhere, informed by data streams rather than lived experience. National identity begins to erode quietly. Engineering was once Germany's answer to geopolitical vulnerability, a way to secure relevance through capability. As that capability becomes distributed, outsourced, or abstracted, leverage diminishes, dependence grows. The country remains an exporter of knowledge, but ownership of that knowledge slips away. The narration highlights a final, uncomfortable truth. Obsolescence is not imposed by technology alone. It is produced by financial frameworks that redefine worth. German engineers are not obsolete because machines can replace them. They are becoming obsolete because the system values what can be moved, hidden, and multiplied over what must be maintained and understood. As the third movement closes, the screen fills with layered financial charts, dissolving into blueprints, then into lines of code, then into darkness. The transformation is complete. Engineering still exists, but it no longer anchors power. The tension now is unmistakable. If a society no longer controls the sources of its own competence, what remains when markets shift, systems strain, and the financial instruments that promised safety begin to fail?
The final movement opens in near silence. A heavy vault door slides shut, its steel surface catching faint gold reflections before darkness seals it closed. Inside, rows of gold bars sit beside humming servers, their indicator lights blinking steadily in deep blue. This is modern wealth, immobile in appearance, infinitely mobile in reality. Ownership is encoded, encrypted, and protected by legal distance. Nothing here was built by engineers in the traditional sense, yet everything depends on their past work. The crisis now reaches its most revealing point. German engineers have not disappeared. Their knowledge still underpins global industry, but the structures that determine who benefits from that knowledge no longer center them. Control has migrated upward into financial abstractions that reward detachment over involvement. The result is not collapse, but quiet displacement. In this world, resilience is simulated, not constructed. Financial instruments promise protection against disruption, allowing decision-makers to accept fragility in physical systems. When supply chains fracture or technologies fail, losses are absorbed through hedges and insurance rather than prevented through design. The engineer's role as guardian against failure is replaced by models that assume failure as a cost of doing business. The camera moves slowly through a German research institute, its corridors lined with portraits of past innovators. Their faces are lit warmly, their achievements celebrated as national milestones. In contrast, present-day labs operate under cooler light, their projects constrained by funding cycles tied to investor expectations. Breakthroughs are encouraged only if they can be quickly monetized or spun into licensable assets. Discovery for its own sake becomes a luxury. Some attempt resistance. A handful of firms choose to retain ownership of intellectual property domestically, reinvesting profits into long-term research and workforce development. These companies appear heavier, slower, less agile in financial rankings. Analysts question their strategy, their stock prices lag. Yet inside, engineering depth endures. These are exceptions, not the rule, and they operate under constant pressure to conform. The narration acknowledges the difficulty of reversal. The financial architecture shaping this crisis is global, entrenched, and self-reinforcing. Tax systems reward offshore structures. Capital markets favor liquidity and speed. Executive incentives align with short-term valuation gains. To change outcomes would require altering incentives at every level, confronting interests that thrive in the shadows. Meanwhile, engineers adapt individually. Some leave traditional industry for software, consulting, or finance, translating technical rigor into financial advantage. Others emigrate, carrying expertise to regions that still align creation with reward. Many remain, committed to their craft despite diminishing influence, maintaining systems whose value they no longer control. The visuals return to the factory floor, now active again. Machines move, sparks fly, dashboards glow. On the surface, nothing appears broken. Production continues, exports flow. But the narration makes clear that continuity can mask erosion. A system can function while losing its core. The final truth settles slowly. Obsolescence is not a sudden event. It is a gradual narrowing of relevance, a quiet reassignment of authority. German engineers are not obsolete in ability, but in leverage. They no longer sit at the center of decisions shaping the future they build. As the documentary nears its end, the camera lifts above the landscape, factories, cities, financial districts connected by invisible lines of capital. Gold tones re-emerge, mixed with deep blue shadows, suggesting both legacy and uncertainty. The question is no longer about Germany alone. It is about any society that allows financial abstraction to outrun productive capability. The screen darkens, leaving only a final reflection. If wealth is hidden, protected, and multiplied far from the hands that create it, what happens when those hands are no longer there? In a world engineered for finance rather than function, the greatest risk may not be technological failure, but the loss of those who know how to build reality itself. The image fades to black, unresolved. The crisis has no dramatic ending, no single villain, no clear solution, only a choice waiting quietly in the shadows between systems that extract value and societies that sustain it.